Question 1. In 1984 U.S. president election, candidates James Blaine and Grover Cleveland received a total of 401 Electoral College votes. The number of Electoral College votes Blaine received, B, was 37, fewer than the number of Electoral College votes that Cleveland received, C. Which system of equations represents this situation? So as far as elimination goes, I know this is number 1, so it's really easy. But strategically, if they both got 401, you're going to eliminate choices A and B for 438. And notice B plus C is 401 and C and D. Now it says the number that Blaine received, B, was 37 fewer than Cleveland. The way I tend to think of this is Blaine is the smaller one. So to get from Blaine to Cleveland, you've got to add 37. And this also means C minus 37 equals B. So going from C to B, you subtract 37. And looking at the answers, that shows us that C is the right one. Question 2, what value of P satisfies the equation? So you should be able to do this in your head. Subtract 8 from both sides, you're going to get negative 2 on the left. Subtract 2p from both sides, you're going to get 5p on the right. And then divide both sides by 5, p equals negative 2/5. You could also plug in p if this were a harder problem, but it's number 2, so probably not necessary. Question 3, which of the following could represent the graph of the linear equation y equals mx plus 3, where m is a positive constant? So this is y equals mx plus b. M is always the slope. Positive slopes always tilt this direction. Doesn't matter how shallow or steep. Negative slopes always tilt this direction. Same idea. So by elimination, we know it's not A, not B. C and D, we know the y-intercept is positive 3, so that's got to be right here. And so D is out because that would be a negative number. Question 4, the equation blah 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 relates to the positive numbers g, h, x, y, and which equation correctly expresses h in terms of g, x, and y? So if they want h in terms of all the others, it basically means they want h on one side, all the numbers and all the letters on the other side. So the first thing we want to do to isolate h is square both sides. Y squared equals hg over x, multiply both sides by x. Xy squared equals hg. Divide both sides by g, we get xy squared over g equals h. And the answer is going to be D. Question 5, if x is a solution, what is one possible value of x minus 1? So you can kind of just eyeball this and know that it's either positive or negative 8. Systematically, for absolute value equations, I like to break them up into 2 cases. Either the absolute value of this equals positive 8 or the absolute value of that equals negative 8. So what I basically do is I eliminate the absolute value signs. I make the right side equal to positive or negative, and that'll get me my answer. So again, if we were solving this, this would be x is either equal to 9 or x is either equal to negative 7. Regardless, they're asking what is one possible value of x minus 1. You only need to look at the first line, and it's either 8 or negative 8, and so A is going to be the answer. Question 6, the graph of the linear equation f is shown. Which equation defines f? So this is a line, obviously. Notice all your answers are going to be in y equals mx plus b form, which makes it easy. The y-intercept is very easy. It's negative 8. So I'm going to eliminate automatically all the choices B and D, where the y-intercept is not negative 8. And now we want to know the slope. So it's funny because if you eyeball this, you probably should know the slope is greater than 1, except when you look at the values, this graph is actually not to scale. So the vertical distance, I'm just picking 2 points that occur right on an intersection. So the vertical distance, negative 2 to negative 8, that's actually a distance of 6. And the horizontal distance, each one box across, is 4 to 0, so that's 4. So the slope is actually 6 over 4 or 3 over 2, and so the answer has to be choice A. Question 7, a research institute conducted phone and mail surveys. The total cost of conducting these surveys was $5,000. The line shown models the possible combinations of phone and mail surveys that the Institute could have conducted. According to the model, what was the cost for each phone survey conducted? So you have to understand what you're looking at. These combination graphs basically tell you this is the combination of phone surveys and mail surveys that you can buy or pay for. And obviously on the extremes, like over here, this is the number of phone surveys you can do with 0 mail surveys. On the other end, this is the number of mail surveys if you don't buy any phone surveys. Everything else is a compromise because the more mail surveys you buy, the fewer phone surveys you can buy. And so that's basically how these graphs work. If they're asking for the cost of each phone survey, you can take any point on the graph, but I would recommend taking the easiest point, which is right here, because 0, 125 shows that if you buy 0 mail surveys and you buy 125 phone surveys, then essentially you're using all $5,000. So to find out what the cost of each phone survey was, you basically just take 5,000 and you divide by 125. And obviously, if you do 125 into 500, that's 4. So this is going to be about 40. And so C is going to be the answer. Question 8, which expression is equivalent to that? And so this is really simple subtraction. Just don't get tripped up with the negative sign in the parentheses. So we can do it piece by piece. 5x cubed minus 2x cubed is going to be 3x cubed. Negative 2x minus positive 2x is going to be negative 4x. Positive 1 minus positive 1 is 1 minus 1, so that's 0. And so the answer is going to be C. Question 9, triangle ABC and DEF each have 2 angles measuring 35 degrees as shown. Which of the following additional pieces of information is sufficient to prove that ABC is congruent to DEF? So before you even look at the answers, you need to kind of have in your mind a working memory of all the ways triangles are proven congruent. So that's side, angle, side, angle, side, angle, side, 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 angle, angle, side. If they were right triangles, it would be high leg, so hypotenuse and leg. And I feel like I might be missing one, but for now, let's keep that in mind. And by the way, for similar triangles, all you need is angle, angle. So we already know that these two are similar. Let's look at what choice A says. ACB and DFE are equal. So we already know that these are equal because if you've got 2 angles that are congruent, the third one has to be congruent because if they're triangles, they add up to 180. So angle, angle automatically means angle, angle, angle. So A doesn't prove that they're congruent. It basically proves that they're similar. B, the lengths of BC and EF are equal. So BC is here and EF are equal. So what do we have here? Side, angle, angle, side, angle, angle. So yeah, this would be angle, angle, side. So it looks like B by angle, angle, side would work. Let's just double check the others. The length of AC and DE are equal. AC and DE. So notice what's going on here. These are not corresponding sides because you've got this side on the first triangle is outside of the 35-degree angles, and this side ED is between the 35-degree angles. So this doesn't prove anything for choice C. And choice D, no additional information is necessary to prove that the 2 triangles are congruent. So that is not true because by having angle, angle, all we know is that they are similar. So we're going to need some sort of a side to prove that they are congruent. Choice 10, I apologize for the quality. So they want to know which one is equivalent. So it's good that this is in fraction form already. This is really just a rules of exponent problem. When you've got 3/4 raised to the 3/2, the rule is you multiply. So that becomes 9/8. And that's multiplied by y to the 1/8. And when you've got the same base multiplied together, the rule is you add the exponents. So this becomes 1/8 plus 9/8, which is going to be 10/8. And that's equal to, in reduced form, y to the 5/4 Now looking at the answer choices, you should automatically see that A is going to work, because when you change this to fraction form, this becomes y to the fifths raised to the 1/4, because it's the fourth root. And so when you distribute this, or when you multiply it out, it becomes y to the 5/4. And so that's the same. Question 11, what is the sine of 3 pi over 4? All right, so this is the type of problem where if you've memorized your major angles, I automatically know that 3 pi over 4 is over here. 3 pi over 4 has a reference angle of pi over 4, and pi over 4, this creates a triangle. This is 45, 45, 90. So if the hypotenuse is 1, this is rad 2 over 2, this is rad 2 over 2, and they want to know the sine. The sine is always the vertical component on the unit circle, and so it's positive rad 2 over 2. And just as a quick recap, the reason I knew that so quickly is because if you remember how many radians are in a circle, it's the same as how many radiuses are in a circle. So 2 pi r in circumference. So the full way around is 2 pi. That means halfway around is 1 pi. So this is 3/4 of a pi, which is going to put me right over here. And this is half a pi. And this is therefore going to be 3/2 of a pi. And 3 pi over 4, as we said, it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So it's rad 2 over 2. Question 12, what is the graph of the equation y equals 2 to the negative x plus 1? So I always tell my students to memorize this graph, y equals 2 to the x. It doesn't actually matter what number you choose for the constant, because this is an exponential equation. It's always going to cross the graph at 0, 1, because when you raise any number to the 0 power, you're going to get 1. And so this is really a problem of translation. So let's go through each of these and ask ourselves what's going on. So notice in choice A, this is actually reflected over the y-axis. So to do that, you have to negate the x. So choice A is going to be y equals 2 to the negative x. But also notice that it doesn't cross the point at 0, 1. It crosses it at 0, 2. So to translate the graph up 2 units, you basically, or to translate it up 1 unit, you basically have to add 1. So this is y equals 2 to the negative x plus 1. It looks like the answer right now, so most likely that's going to work. Notice choice B, what they do here. This is also flipped over the y-axis, so this is going to be y equals 2 to the negative x. It still crosses at 0, 1, so there's no need to do any other math, and so this is the equation for choice B. So let's look at D first, because if we compare D to the original y equals 2 to the x, what you'll notice is that this is simply a translation over the x-axis, and to do that, you negate the whole equation. And so D is going to be y equals negative 2 to the x. But then if you translate this to here, you're going to be down at 0, -1. So to move this graph from 0, -1 up 3 units, we're going to have to add 3. D is the easier graph when you're using the one I told you to memorize as a reference, because notice what choice C is. C is basically D, but flipped over the y-axis. And so all you really need to do is negate the x for choice C. So you've got y equals -2 to the negative x plus 3. And these are basically the equations for the answers. So I took the time to go through that because this is a good problem. And basically choice A is going to be the answer. What you should memorize is this basic form of the graph, y equals 2 to the x. Question 13, in 2005, 10 phlox plants were planted in a garden. The number of phlox plants increased by 140% each year. Which of the following equations best models the estimated number of plants P in the garden T years after 2005? So if you've got an increase by 140%, and notice by looking at the answers, this is a typical exponential growth problem. They all follow the same format, the equations. You have to put the number that you start out with right over here. And so we started out with 10. The only answers that make sense are going to be C and D. So we can eliminate A and B automatically. And the next thing is, this is a little bit tricky, because if the plants increased by 140%, That's not the same as saying that they increased by 40%. How do you represent an increase of 140%? That means not only did it double because it's an increase of 100%, on top of the doubling, it's another 40%. So the way you represent that as a fraction, it's going to be 240 over 100. Because if you think about it, 140% increase means the result is going to be 240% of the original. So what you basically do is you take 10, multiply it by 240 over 100, and that translates into 2.4. And given that this happens every year, you just kind of raise that to the t, which shows you that choice D is the answer. Looking at choice C, what you want to realize is choice C is actually an increase in 14% every year. And if you wanted to do an increase in 40%, it would be P equals 10 times 1.4, all raised to the t. Question 14, the graph of the function is shown in the xy plane. What is the y-intercept of the graph y equals f of x plus 2? So if you remember your translations, if you add 2 to the x, you're basically going left 2 on the graph. So what does this graph look like if we moved it, like let's say we dragged it 2 units to the left? So this part, this section right here, I'm just going to redraw it. It's going to be going from here to here. That's going there, and that's going to be going straight up. And this one's going to be also looking like that. So notice what happens to the y-intercept. Instead of it being 0, 2, it's going to be 0, 3. And so choice A is going to be the answer. So to generalize about this, if we started off with f of x, y equals f of x, and now our new equation is y equals f of x plus 2. That means we're going to be moving left 2. If our new equation is y equals f of x minus 2, that's right 2. And if our equation is f of x, but we're adding 2 to the whole equation, that's up 2. Y equals f of x minus 2, and that's going to be down 2. So if you memorize this, and this is the same thing as the other problem with translations, the one with the exponential functions. The only difference here is I'm putting it into function language. But if you know this, you should be able to handle any problem that looks like that. Question 15, of the two equations in a linear system, one of them is 2x plus 2y equals 2. The other, the system has no solution. Which equation could be the other equation in the system? So there's a couple ways to do this. One is if you just look at the answers, what you'll realize very quickly is, hey, if this is 2x plus 2y equals one thing, and choice D is 2x plus 2y equals another thing, there's no way these two solutions could have any intersection, or these two graphs could intersect, because they're not equal to the same thing. And writing that out, I'll just show you very quickly. It would look like 2x plus 2y is equal to 2, and then 2x plus 2y is equal to 3. And notice what would happen if you solve this as a system of equations, subtract maybe the first one from the second one, you get 1 equals 0, so that doesn't make sense. If you set them up equal to each other, 2x plus 2y, which is typically what the SAT likes to do, and then this is 2x plus 2y on the other side, and if these two, this one is equal to 2 and this one's equal to 3, that's not going to work either. So both of these ways of doing it prove that this has no solution. You could also change this to y equals mx plus b form, because parallel lines also don't have solutions. So this becomes y equals negative x plus 1. And then let's do the same thing here to choice D. We get 2y equals negative 2x plus 3, divide by 2 on both sides, negative x plus 3 halves. So visually, what's this going to look like? You've got a line with a slope of negative 1 and a y-intercept of 1. It's going to look like that. Here, you've got a slope of negative 1 also, and the y-intercept is 3 halves, so it's like 1 1/2. So this is going to be a parallel line that's right above the other line, and basically parallel lines never meet. So visually, that's what it looks like when they have no solution. So whether you do it algebraically, visually, doesn't really matter. This is kind of the preferred way on the SAT because a lot of times they'll set up an equation like this and you kind of just have to eliminate variables to get to a contradictory statement. So whatever way you want to do it, it's easy. And you do kind of have to go through each of these if you didn't get it visually. I just focus on D because just to save time. Question 16, what is the value of g of 8? So this is very simple plug in. Formally it looks like this. G of 8 is going to be 2 plus 8 over 8, and that's going to be 10 over 8 or 5 over 4. They should mark either one correct. Line H is defined by y equals negative 8x plus 7. What is the slope of the line? That's perpendicular. So this is already in y equals mx plus b. Perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals. So what's the negative reciprocal of negative 8? It's positive 1 over 8. And that's going to be the answer. Remember, on these free response questions, you can't really put in negative signs, I'm pretty sure. So just keep that in mind. 18, the solution is the ordered pair x, y. What is the value of x? So strategy tip here, if we're solving for x, let's eliminate the y's. So 2 and 3, the least common multiple is 6. So let's multiply the top by 3, multiply the bottom by 2. I'm going to write that out. 3x plus 6y equals 33. The bottom is 6x plus 6y equals 48. Now to keep my math relatively simple, I'm going to subtract the first equation from the second. 48 minus 33 is going to be 15. 6y minus 6y is 0. 6x minus 3x is going to be 3x. Divide both sides by 3. We get x equals 5, and that's directly what they want. So notice we don't have to substitute x back into the equation to get y because we solve for x directly. Question 19, we got rectangular prisms with different volumes. Rectangular prism A is similar to rectangular prism B, where the longest side of A corresponds to the longest side of B, so that's the definition of similar stuff. The table gives the volumes of the two prisms. The length of the longest side of A is 6. What is the length of the longest side of B? So one thing you might have been thinking is to set up a proportion, right? Like 6 over 96 equals x over 12. The reason that won't work is because even though the sides of these prisms are in proportion, the volume is not going to be in proportion because you're multiplying, each side by another set of sides, which changes the relationship. So I don't know the best way to do this. What I did was I kind of just factored. Prime factorization was something that the SAT kind of de-emphasized. So if we're factoring 96, then the first thing I was thinking is, okay, 6 goes into 96 because 6 is one of the lengths. How many times does it go into 96? 16 times. And then we can factor 16 however you want. It could be 4 and 4 or 8 and 2. No, actually it can't be 8 and 2 because 6 is the longest, so our only options are actually going to be 4 and 4. All right, so let's factor the other one. This one is 12. So 12 is a lot easier, right? Because you can do 2 and 6 or 3 and 4, but 6 is not going to work because we know we'll have to factor it more actually. So let's do 3 and 4, and so we'll factor the 4. And so it looks like these three are going to be our length, 6, 4, 4, 3, 2, 2. They are similar because to get to each one, you have to multiply by a factor of 2. So if the longest side here is 6, the longest side here is going to be 3. And just in case you're curious, you could have factored it as 6 and 2, but then you'd have to keep factoring the 6, which is 3 and 2. And then notice you kind of get the same result. Your three lengths are going to be 3, 2, 2. So however you want to do it is fine. Question 20, we've got a quadratic and it says one solution can be written like this. So if you see a solution to a quadratic that looks like this with a radical, you know we're talking about a quadratic formula. So let's just do it. It's going to be negative b, which is positive 10, plus minus square root of b squared, which is 100, minus 4 times a is 1 times c is 14, all square rooted all over 2 times a, which is 1. So let's figure out what's going on here first. 4 times 14 is 56. 100 minus 56 is 44. And the 10 stays the same, all over 2. Now let's simplify this. So this is a square root. So what am I going to do? I'm going to break this up into 4 times 11. So if it's 4 times 11 in the radical, this becomes 2 rad 11. So I'll rewrite it here. 2 rad 11, 10. And now we divide both components by 2. This becomes 5 plus minus rad 11. And notice now it matches what they give us here, and therefore has to be 11.